Today's guest is Kambis, one of the most influential voices in Austria's startup scene, and someone who's been quietly shaping the entrepreneurial landscape across Europe. From building ventures like 𝗖𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗃 to leading startup services at Austria's Federal Economic Chamber, Kambis has sat at the intersection of policy, innovation, and founder grit. He's been on both sides of the tables as a founder and an ecosystem builder, and he brings a rare blend of realism and optimism to every conversation. In this episode, we dive deep into the startup ecosystem of Vienna, the EU, and how they compare to the US. We talk about what makes a startup truly great, the silent challenges European founders face, and what needs to change in Europe if it wants to compete on a global scale. Whether you're an early stage founder in Europe or a global investor curious about the next frontier, this one's for you. Canvas, for those who might not know you, how did your journey into startups and entrepreneurship begin?
Yeah, great to be here, Albi. Thank you for inviting me for this episode. So I started around 2011 with my first startup. So I became a founder in the fields of education and HR. It was right after graduating from my university, so I was quite young, inexperienced. And I was there with my first venture for around 5 years. And then I moved out and started to set up new ventures in different fields, including HR and education again, but also mobility and e-commerce, for instance. After 10 years, I said, okay, let's switch a bit aside, and it turned into an angel investor, which I'm still and have been quite active here in Austria, but also internationally. Um, with that different angle in terms of like how you approach it, the whole topic. And now for 5 years now, I'm in a more publicly oriented, affiliated position at the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, which is the official chamber of commerce in Austria, meaning that roughly 600,000 companies are official member companies, including startups and new enterprises. And together with my team, I'm responsible for them, serving them, supporting them. And again, another angle, another perspective. Yeah, that's about me.
And so basically, you've been a founder, an investor, an advisor, now working for the government. Which one do you enjoy the most and why?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's not so easy to answer. I mean, I think when you become an entrepreneur at one point, you will always stick and remain an entrepreneur. Even if you work for a big organization, whether it's private or public, you still have this entrepreneurial spirit. So it's something that once you have smelled it, you usually will stick with it to some extent at least. I mean, all of them have like pros and cons. So think, for instance, as a founder, you can be very flexible. You believe you're your own boss, at least at the beginning. At one point, you understand you
You
will
believe
actually,
that you never are.
yeah, because because you will serve everyone at least, in terms of like, yeah, maybe it's your own company, you have a big stake, whatever, but still you have your business partners, your investors, your customers. You always serve someone.
Customers more important,
Yeah,
more
yeah.
more
It's not like
important.
that
Yeah.
you think that okay, it's just me and it's it. I mean, if you're young and inexperienced as I was, yeah, you might believe it. But you are more flexible. You're fast. You build something
Yeah.
up totally new that actually can change whole industries and economies. Um, this kind of excited feeling. You create impact. It's great. I mean, cons on the other hand. Um, it's not unusual that you are low in cash at one point. So I had actually 2 times when I was like not knowing how to actually fund myself and the company the next month. So on the verge of going bankrupt. Uh, uh, Quite difficult. I mean,
If you don't have that on your startup
yeah,
journey, then you haven't tried
yeah. I mean,
building a startup.
yeah, it's very unusual if you never faced this, but difficult
Yeah.
times. Particularly also then when you grow and scale, this immense pressure you have, you're putting on yourself as well, not just because of external factors, but yourself.
Correct.
So this is not so easy to cope with. Then as an investor, particularly if you are somehow like a founder investor, so in terms of like you were a founder and now you want to invest, you invest, but you don't have this kind of active role as you have maybe been used to. And this can be difficult because you believe at least that you know things, more, you're more experienced, and then sometimes you want to get more operationally active.
I'm
Yeah,
curious when
yeah,
we are on the investor side and
yeah,
when you see like a founder executing, and it's not like how you have done it, for example. So how do you cope with that? So how do you trust somebody else your money and trust them with the execution, even though in many
yeah.
cases you would
Uh,
act differently?
Happy that you're asking because I think being being a founder on your own at one point and getting the trust of others, so that you can continue building the great thing you want to build, you have somehow a responsibility to do the same later on. I really believe in
Mm,
this. So meaning, um, it's not just can you just go one way, people trusting you and that's it. So if you then become successful with your company, you have the money, start investing into others, but trusting them. And the thing is, you can never be 100% sure, never, whatever stage. But there are
yeah.
factors you can take a look at. Just think about yourself when you were a founder. What you were good at, what you were not good at, what was important to scale the business, and also
Yeah.
the things you try to be cheeky and maybe not like communicate to others. Think about this as well, because this actually will give you an angle as an investor also to understand where you should take a more look at. But in the end, for me, it's experience is important.
Mm,
A good team is important. Having understanding about AI technology and so on. But in the end, it's for me about reliability and the attitude towards patience. So, as a good
yeah.
founder or founding team, you need patience and you need to be reliable. That's it. If you align on something, do it. Don't find excuses. It's very important, a very important trait for me. And now, again, back to what I was explaining. So, as an investor, you take a look at specific KPIs. You should also, even if it's early stage, it's not so easy, but you should. And it's about getting a financial return on investment at some point. Um, it doesn't have to be just financially, because for me, there are also strategic angles on it, or why I would invest into someone. But still, you want to get some kind of return, and you need to be prepared and have the right expectation that you can lose all of the invested money and time. That's why you need to spread and diversify. If you think investing to 4 or 5 companies will turn them all of them in unicorns, I mean, you have to be a lucky bastard that this works. I tell you. So you need to have the right expectation, try to diversify and spread, and there will be success stories. And some will start promising and then turn, more negatively, and some will start okay, but they will become more promising, because markets are dynamic. To change, it's not so easy. Um,
Yeah.
I'm now getting back to my current role actually for 5 years. I mean, sure, you don't have the speediness, you don't have the flexibility. It's in a political environment, it's a political organization, so we serve startups and founders from pre-foundation until scaling and even exit. We try to educate them, but we also lobby for them. So it's a political organization that is part of the legislation process, not just in Austria, but also on European Union level. And there are a lot of stakeholders involved. Think about it, just in Austria alone, and then you move into Europe.
Yeah.
It's not like make the decision. That's how it works. It would be good. It would be great, but that's not how it works. So you need to bring a lot of patience. You need to work even more with others. You need to try to understand the perspective. But still, it's also very fascinating because you can move stuff. You can move stuff sometimes short term, but sometimes long term. So 5 years upwards. You have somehow more security in your environment and stability,
Mm,
particularly, but still it's a dynamic position. So you can still do a lot of stuff because they're all in a transition phase. So all of Europe, all the governments, I believe, are in a transition phase. So it's also quite great, a great like environment, to thrive as well. But it's not like being a founder or being an investor.
Now, you are one of the key people that is shaping the ecosystem, startup ecosystem of Austria. So, what makes Austria and Vienna in particular, since it's the capital, unique as a startup hub?
So I mean, it's not. So we are not just responsible, me and my team actually, for Vienna, but all of Austria. We have 9 states. We have different hubs, great ones that are very good in 2, 3 key technologies. But Vienna for sure is the biggest one. More than 50% of all the startups in Austria are headquartered in Vienna.
Yeah.
Um, it's the most international city. It's the biggest city, the most diverse one. You have like clusters where Vienna is quite strong, from life science to, for instance, in fintech. You wouldn't believe it, but fintech specifically when it comes to crypto, blockchain, Web3, there's a lot of know-how here. Good players, for instance. Vienna is becoming more and more the European hub for crypto-related
Yeah.
startups. I can tell you we have
I've
Bitpanda
heard
here.
that
Yeah,
Vienna is becoming like the capital of crypto in Europe.
yeah, so it's no one knows why, but it happened. I mean, we have some very good key stakeholders here. Think about the Financial Market Authority.
Yeah.
They're very eloquent when it comes to know how about the market. They have actually started 10 years ago, faster than anyone else in Europe, and they've gained a lot of knowledge. We, the Chamber of Commerce, try to push it further. We have great organizations like the DAAA, the Digital Asset Association Austria, and we have key companies, like Bitpanda, that actually turned out to a unicorn company, and they're attracting talent and also like
Nice.
other investors and companies. And then, for
Yeah.
instance, Bybit has just opened its European headquarters in Vienna. KuCoin is opening its headquarters here, and there are more than 20 similar companies in Austria, but also abroad, that are moving or on the verge of moving to Vienna. So we have great sectoral clusters. Also, what's something I want to mention is the area of culture and technology, Caltech. Think about the entertainment industry, movies, audio, music, gaming. Austria brings a lot of history, and it's one of the capitals actually in this area. We have even specific funds that focus only on this area. Also, more than 60% of all the capital allocated to startups in Austria goes to Viennese startups. But just to give you a sum up, now if you want me to present some numbers,
Yeah.
that
Sure.
you see what kind of development has been there. So I know Austria's and the Viennese ecosystem since 2010, 11 where it started. And if you take a look at some numbers, so for instance, if you consider all of the GSA region, Germany, Switzerland, Austria,
Hmm.
there have been reports published on this by 𝗖𝗵𝗽𝗀 and Co. Then Vienna comes fourth in the German-speaking actually regions. First Berlin, then Munich, then Zurich, and then actually Vienna.
Vienna.
In terms of like overall importance, growth, size, and so on.
Yeah.
If you now consider all of Europe, all the European hubs there, and take into consideration the growth in terms of number of startups, number of investors, capital allocated, accelerators, incubators, whatever is there, and you compare it from 2018 to 2024, then Vienna comes third in all of Europe after Lisbon and after Madrid in terms of growth, ecosystem growth. Um,
Mm.
um, I can also tell you that since 2018 to 2024, again, the same time range somehow, that the growth in venture capital has been all proportionally high, not just in Vienna, but all of Austria. Now, because of the economic situation, it's more difficult, I can tell you, but for 5, 6 years, there's been constant growth, and we're trying to work on it to actually get back to on this track. So it might not be the first city you would think about when it comes to startup, tech, etc.
Yeah.
But I'm
But
telling
also,
you,
it's a much smaller city from the
yeah,
ones that you just
yeah,
mentioned before.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's very important for me also to mention this because I mean, think about it. Vienna is like a student city. We have students from not just Austria but all around the world, particularly Central and
Mm.
Eastern Europe. But a lot of talent, good research institutions, good incubators that are very scientifically and bring out actually extraordinary talented entrepreneurs.
So, what policies made this kind of push for Austria to become this powerful in the startup ecosystem, and for this ecosystem to evolve in the last 5 or 10 years? What smaller countries like Albania, for example, my home country, can copy from Austria
Mhm.
to push their startup ecosystem further?
Sure. I mean, Albania is actually, I believe, just wanted to mention it, is on the verge of progressing very much. So it's
Mm,
becoming more international. There's a lot of more activities going on. There are a lot of people in tech, software development, AI.
yeah,
It's one of the key regions in Balkan, I believe, that is really turning into more and more startup hub. Um, I mean, overall, if you take a look at all the ecosystem and hubs all around the world, usually roughly it takes around 10 years to build an ecosystem. Why?
true.
So usually would have some kind of governmental programs first, some kind of initiatives, can be tax incentives, moving money into the venture capital, new ventures and startups. Um, Good regulation that fosters, the foundation of companies, new companies, make it easier. And then it will evolve and usually would focus on, let's say, 3, 4, 5 key areas where you want to actually evolve something. Mentioned some of them before. Life science, for instance, has been in the focus for 10 years now. Quantum computing, for instance, another one, Caltech, and so on. Um, and then if you're good, talented entrepreneurs and at least some kind of initial funding, either by private or public. In Austria, we have
Yeah,
like a very huge public grants infrastructure here. Then they will progress and develop. They will attract even more talent and international investors, and then there will be the first exit events
mm,
or first unicorn events. And this actually will lead to more and more international investment and talents coming to a specific hub and also reinvest the money by, for instance, exited founders into the local ecosystem. And this can be leveraged very much and usually is if there are good governmental projects and public initiatives, starting with the right regulation, having the right education in terms of like the talent you need now. Think about just AI, data engineering, whatever.
yeah,
Um, Creating some kind of tax incentives or any kind of incentives, financial ones that actually pour money into this area and make it international as well. And
mm,
then after 10 years, you would have actually established a ecosystem. Still, there are other countries I also want to just mention as well. Think about Switzerland, think about Denmark, think about Sweden, Estonia. They all have done it. And globally, think about also globally, not just Europe. Think about Singapore, for instance. Not
mm,
such huge in terms of like population, but very good in what they do. And the Blaupause is very similar. Huh? So you need the right talent, you need the right education, you need access to capital, access to market, and then a public-private, dynamics, and then actually it would an ecosystem will grow.
yeah. And some of the things that you just mentioned being implemented here in Albania as well. We have Plug and Play now that has opened an office in Albania. Also, the Albanian government is an investor to Thinking Machines, which is Mira Murati's new startup, which make a record-breaking 2 billion pre-seed round.
Yeah, that's actually what everyone needs. It's same with
Yeah.
Austria. We have like entrepreneurs all around the world, very successful, and then you need to have this kind of affiliation that they also pour the money back and the
Mm,
know-how they have into the ecosystem. So it's great,
correct.
actually. So you're right.
Yeah. Now, how do you see the broader EU startup ecosystem maturing now? Because we see many startups coming from Europe now that are expanding. I would say in a very different pace from a few years back. You have Lovable, for example, the latest unicorn coming out from Europe. So how do you see this ecosystem?
Yep. So again, it's important to take a look at the numbers, and not just the perception, but at the numbers. So
Hmm.
what I can tell you is uh, there were times where 90% of all the invested capital all around the world in venture capital went to US startups.
Of
Maybe
course.
even like 97, 98%. But
Yeah.
these times are gone. Still, the US is leading in a lot of areas and they do things smarter than Europe. And I will also give an example by some numbers here. Um, but and euro was like about, I don't know, 2% or something like this. And now, if you take a look at decades, so from the 1970s to 1980s, 2000s, and so on, um, Europe actually has now quite a big portion on all the invested capital, and it has actually increased over time. So there were, I remember, some times where we fell behind China and Asia and so on, but
Yeah.
now actually it has become again number two. If you split China and Asia, because
Yeah.
China is so big, and we also compare US, not just North America. So you have the US still, then Europe, then China, and then the rest of Asia, but also emerging
Hmm.
regions popping out. Think about the Middle East, GCC, or Africa as well. Um, so we have been progressing in terms of invested capital, and the enterprise value, new enterprise value of new startups is actually has been very successful in the last couple of years. So that's good. That's good. That's a good sense on. But let me also give you now the other side. What's not so good? So the thing is, Europe is still quite fragmented. Even if you have the European Union,
Yeah.
still
True.
regulation differs. There is no one unified capital union. It's fragmented still, and we're also in competition with each other. That's the thing.
Mm.
We are in competition with each other.
With each other.
But
True.
it would be easier for us if we wouldn't be in competition with each other, but in competition, let's say, with China or the US or Asia, whatever.
But
Uh,
how
um,
can you achieve that? Because
yeah,
US, for example, is a federal government,
yeah,
where Europe is mostly a political union. So
yeah,
uh, one of the issues in Europe is that you need to basically incorporate in every EU member
yeah,
state in order to
yeah,
hire in different EU states. Now I see that there are some initiatives, for example, like EU Inc., where there can be a union level entity. But do you think that will pass? Because that means that states in Europe will use sovereignty on their corporations or their companies.
yeah,
Would they be up for that? I don't see that happening, even though
yeah,
the initiative is very, very good
yeah,
and
yeah,
it would like solve many, many, many problems.
yeah,
I don't see that happening.
yeah. Yeah, I can relate to this. I will actually respond to your question,
Yeah.
but getting back to where we're, for instance, lacking,
Hmm.
because this is connected with each other. So the
Okay.
thing you just mentioned, the European Inc., the EU Inc., and the new European Union Startup and Scale-up Strategy, that's
Hmm.
a reason because of what I tell you now. So the thing is, um, so we have good R&D. We have high tech clusters. We have amazing talent, and you can see it worldwide. In all continents, you see European talent actually doing extraordinary stuff, building the companies there as well, not just in Europe. But what we can see, two factors. First of all, we haven't been able to commercialize a lot of the R&D we have made. You know, building great ventures out of it, a monetization model, business model, patenting, and stuff like this. We're lacking there compared to the US, but also China. Huh? And the second thing is, if you just consider scale ups in Europe, so startups that are already, let's say 4 years upwards, already
Yeah.
growing much more, very international, and so on. Um, they so I think the number is around 1/6. So 1 out of 6 of these scale ups have moved at one point their headquarters to the US.
To US.
And
True.
this is a capital outflow and a talent outflow into another continent, in specifically now
Mm.
the US. And that's an issue because they get the R&D here, they get the public grants,
Yeah.
they provided the talent. And at one point, they say the market environment doesn't fit anymore to really growing, and we need more capital in particular. And there are the US investors say, okay, we can do this, but you need to have
Deal is one
the
example.
whatever.
Yeah, Deal, Alex, the founder of Deal, he's from Paris. I know him.
Yeah,
Shout out to him.
yeah, yeah,
But they have incorporated in the United States because
yeah,
it's much easier for them to
yeah,
raise and
yeah,
scale, and
yeah,
then they can basically incorporate anywhere in the world. But
yeah.
US is still the main player.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just Deal. There are others because you just mentioned one, Lovable. So
Mm.
Lovable has been this fastest growing software as a service startup that has been there. Great team. They're actually from Sweden. They're a Swedish company in terms of like a lot of the value is created in Swedish, the founders and so on. But where is the entity? It's in Delaware. It's
True.
in Delaware. I think a lot
Yeah.
of people don't know, but it is. And same with Austrian startups. I can tell you, there are like great Austrian startups. There are now unicorns abroad. For instance, Magic or Liquid AI,
Yeah.
both in the space of AI, both unicorns, very fast development. Both are actual Austrian founding teams. And the same you have with all the other European nations. And because of this approach with the EU startup scale-up strategy, including the EU Inc., was born. And now, getting back to a question, so if it's going to be implemented, so I think we need it. We totally
Yeah.
need it.
100% we need that.
Austria needs it. Europe needs it. Um, and will it be executed to this extent? And now I can tell you, because I had all these positions, founder, investor, and also in the policy making side. I think just some people in from the practical side, so founders and investors, just too naive, in terms of how they think the world works in politics.
Yeah.
They get very fast frustrated because at one point when they're involved, they see how it works, because it's not just about what makes sense mostly for a continent or a region. It's about stakeholder management. It's about interest policies. It's about different interest groups. And the approach in Europe is to get all together, and this takes time and effort, and usually leads to some kind of solution that is in the middle of it, and not neither the one extreme or the other. And now, so we are pushing it as well, I can tell you, to get this done. But the thing is, so what does it say, the strategy? So a 28 regime. So imagine a virtual nation. The 28 nation would be somehow created, which is virtually. And
Okay.
then startups and companies and founders from all the European Union member countries can opt in into this and say they have the same standard regulatory conditions, which are very founder friendly, and the national actually conditions, national law wouldn't apply, because it's own country, 28, let's say, a country in the European Union, and it's virtually. And this means national sovereignty is not is somehow doesn't play so much a role here. And this is where, think about it, all the other nations and all the stakeholders, just I can tell you from Austria how many stakeholders are involved, how many interest groups
Yeah,
getting
but
this done.
still, if you have this entity on as a 28th state, for example, if I want to hire somebody in Austria, do I need to still incorporate in Austria?
If I do what in Austria?
If I need to hire somebody in
No,
Austria, do I need to
no.
still incorporate? But how then? Which
Yeah.
local laws will apply to
Yeah.
me?
So, as far as I know, the proposed solution is not somehow affecting labor law. That's one of the things. So labor and tax, these are the two things usually. So labor and taxing. So labor laws, because they're quite different. And Austria has a very strong labor law from the perspective of employees. Yeah.
Yeah.
And taxing. And this is where we have this conflict of interest. How the taxing works, how the law of labor works, and so on. But and as far as I know, what I know in terms of like the papers and the concept, because we're also involved, this shouldn't be affected too much. Okay. But still, I mean, I can also create now an entity in Austria and hire people from other countries as well. This is not an issue. Okay, this is now possible, and will be possible in the future as well. But the thing is, which labor laws come into play? Huh?
Hmm.
If I'm, for instance, from Austria or Albania, and I mean, in the future, for instance, and I say,
Yeah.
okay,
So
I joined the new regime. What kind? So if I hire, let's say, someone from Albania, or let's say from Germany, or whatever, what kind of labor law comes into play? And also then the taxing, the corporate taxing, and all the stuff related to it. And that's quite complicated, because we're still fragmented. We have different national laws, and this is where the conflict of interest is. But,
yeah.
but so just one thing. Theoretically, it's possible, but you need to get the stakeholders on board.
Well, how I'm thinking this, so just top of my mind. So basically, you incorporate in an EU level, then you decide which jurisdiction you want to follow for taxes, but it will still face some backlash, I think, because if you are a founder from France, for example, you incorporate in EU level, but then you choose like a tax-friendly state to be taxed in. So France wouldn't opt in for that, and Germany wouldn't opt in for that. So that's why I'm a little bit skeptical if
Yeah,
this will be put in place, because it's a
understand.
very needed legal framework, but very challenging to get applied. And
Understand. Yeah, understand.
myself, I've had two experiences with EU. So with my previous startup, we built hotel management software. In US, we could just go sell, no issues at all. In Europe, so if we wanted to penetrate in Italy, for example, we needed to integrate with the Italian fiscal system. Then we needed to integrate with the Italian police report, because every hotel needs to report who is staying at the hotel every day to the police. Then you go in Germany, then you need to integrate with the German fiscal system. So it's very fragmented. Where in US, you just build it once, you start selling. You don't need to do with all this fragmentation. Not to mention language barriers, culture
Exactly.
barriers, and so on.
Exactly. So just one thing here to add on this. I think founders from Europe who do this, expand in Europe, they're much actually more
Mm,
profound and better teams than compared to the US countries, because they the challenges they have are on another scale. But yeah, it's true, because Europe overall,
yeah,
biggest country. Let's now, if you don't consider Russia, but let's say now Germany, they have like 80 million, and overall Europe is decreasing in terms of population. So if you want to
mm,
scale, you need to have these kind of aligned markets where you can scale easily.
yeah,
And the language is one thing, but also the different national regulations. So that's difficult to scale and actually create champions.
mm,
We want to create champions, global champions. But for this, we need to create an European economy, a European system that actually leverages this and doesn't actually make it slower.
yeah. Yeah, and my second experience with incorporating in EU is with my new company, which is called EU Presence. So basically, here we want to make it easy for companies outside EU to be compliant with EU regulations. But still, my main company is in Delaware because it's easier. But I still need to open 27 subsidiaries across Europe in
Yeah.
order to give you EU-wide coverage. So if I had to open only once, it would have been much easier, less expensive, and so on. So I hope that gets passed.
Yeah, working on it. Let's see. Okay, working on
Yeah.
it, but challenging. Yeah.
So if you had to import one thing from the US startup playbook to Europe, what would it be, in your opinion?
One thing is difficult. No, I think there's
Two,
not
three
just one
lines.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, one thing. I mean, one we already mentioned. This harmonized market. To make a
Mm.
bigger market out of it, a bigger market to sell your product, with access to more uh, customers actually, but also with regards to the capital, because I mentioned it uh, uh, before, we are also competing with each other
Hmm.
because it's fragmented, but it shouldn't be this way, and if we can harmonize it more, the capital, the volume of capital would reach really as very significant a level, where then there would be enough scale up capital here in Europe as well. Um, but that's not the maybe not even the most important thing. Um, I believe actually, again, in terms of trade, and the one thing which I would integrate is more culturally related
Hmm.
thing. The combination of being fast and being risky, you know, this combination. Try to be fast as good as it gets, as fast as it gets, etc. And then also be open to risks. This combination, if we would have this to the same extent, which you can not just see in the US, but also now in other regions, huh?
Yeah.
Around the world. This actually would fire up a lot of stuff.
Mm. Okay, so you've spent time with US founders and investors, I'm assuming. Where do you think the EU still lags behind US, apart from this segmentation that we just talked about? So also in the founder's mindset, because from the experience that I have, for example, with both entrepreneurs that I've met, US founders tend to think like very global, very big, where European founders are a little bit more conservative. Same with investors. So investors in US, they want to invest in big and bold ideas, where in Europe are a little bit more conservative. Do you have a business plan? Do you have a financial model? Do you have this? Do you have that? So many requirements, where in US they can invest just from a conversation in a safe note. I heard a story a few days ago that Tim Draper, for example, were in a coffee shop with the founder. He liked the idea. In the coffee shop, signed a safe note. Next day, he wired the money to their bank account. That I haven't heard happening in Europe.
Um, yeah, I mean, so I mean, we don't have enough people like Tim Draper in Europe for sure. I
Yeah,
wouldn't just count on the story is pretty true. It really was like this, but still, we would need more people like this. I mean, you already mentioned it. I mean, and this has to do, again, I believe, being so fragmented and a lot of smaller countries we have.
mm,
That we tend to think, smaller as well. In US founder, you have it there. Okay, big market already. Yeah, we for
yeah,
sure the US can we expand to 330 million people or whatever, hundreds of thousands, millions of companies, and being so fragmented in a lot of smaller countries, it's not so easy, to think then totally globally. So the way we are educated or raised up, that's something that's an issue, and I would even, I think what we're also still missing is focusing much more on emerging regions. You know,
mm,
all of Middle East, all of Southeast Asia, all of Africa. There's so much growth potential there, and I don't meet actually so many European founders who really, think about them. Hey, let's go for this because there's less competition. Maybe there's growth actually. They think more about, okay, political risk, legal risk. Yeah, to some extent here and there that is true, but
yeah,
they don't even think about it. They think about, okay, let's start with our first country here, then go to the neighboring countries, which also makes sense, process wise, and then let's go to I don't know, North America or whatever. But think more about the emerging hubs. There's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of growth there, and don't think about just the next 2-3 years. Think a bit, you know, thinking more global and bigger also means thinking more long term, huh?
yeah.
About the next 5 to 10 years where you want to be. Um, and this is something I think we should improve.
Mm. Now, how do you think founders can better navigate these fragmented markets in Europe that we mentioned before, like different languages, different regulations?
I mean, in a lot of countries in Europe, you have support networks. Let's say, for instance, Austria now, we have the Chamber of Commerce, and you
Mhm.
are very international. So we have offices that are active in over 100 countries for decades now. So there's a lot of infrastructure available when you want to expand. Then you get in touch, and then they will support you with the expansion. Getting in touch with the right stakeholders, understanding the legal frameworks, understanding how the markets work, and so on. That's one thing you can access. So think about your local support networks. Which kind of organization has the infrastructure, is international, and get in touch. Also, get in touch with people from the specific country, maybe even founders.
Yeah,
2 3 people you can exchange, and then I think you also should travel there. Travel there, go there, understand it, feel it. I mean, I was in Albania 2 times now in the last 2 4 years to understand what's happening there. How do the people think? What is important for them? It's still different than just being online, remote, and talking through phone, whatever. You go there, experience it. That's what a founder should do, even if it takes time and resources. You should do this because then the expansion probably will be much more successful.
yeah. So you've seen hundreds of startups. What separates a good startup from a great one?
Um, so first, I don't think you can be 100% sure if something becomes successful or not. It's just more about probabilities. Who has a
Mhm.
higher probability, who has less, and this depends on different factors. The quality of the team, the experience of the team, the access to capital, the market itself. Is it dynamic? Is it growing? The competition, how fast you can make money out of it, etc., etc. Okay,
Yeah.
but in the end, I can tell you just also based on my personal experience, is about traits. Good founders and entrepreneurs have, and this combination of being reliable as a founder and also being patient, this will give them the edge, over others. Um, because I can tell you, I've worked with teams that have been very promising in the beginning in terms of like hard skills, for instance, and industry experience. But when times became more difficult, it also didn't work. They also started to
Mm.
perform less, and vice versa. I've seen teams that started less promising, still promising, but less promising, but actually to turn out to be great because in difficult times, you can only see how good a team really is and
Yeah.
not. So I think it's about hard
Everybody can
quality versus
smile
great.
and work when things are good, but when the hard times come, that's where you need to see the determination and how everybody can stick together and make it work, find a solution.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. If a founder is thinking about relocating or launching their company in Austria or Vienna, what should they know?
Yeah. So first, we have different organizations that will support you with that. First, we have the Austrian Business Agency.
Mhm.
They are an international agency that belong to Austria, to the ministry, and they have the goal to support international founders to come to Austria, whether it's Vienna or Linz or Salzburg or Styria, Graz, whatever, like whatever it is in Austria. They will support you, and at one point they will also involve us, the Chamber of Commerce, our internationalization department, which is called Advantage Austria in a specific country,
Mhm.
and also us in headquarters when it really becomes now operational in terms of now you want to found the company. They will give you an understanding about like the great public grants infrastructure we have. We have a lot of grants actually, particularly early stage, about the support networks, about the regulation, about the new legal entity form which was recently launched last year, called Flexible Company and so on, which is more um, designed for startups actually who want to scale, stuff like this. And we are also, depending on the state you are, we have our local agencies on site. Let's say in Vienna, the Vienna Business Agency, who also come into play, and we're all connected. So it doesn't matter where you actually enter. The other parties will be involved so that you get a full service. Um, what I can tell you, we have a lot of public grants over personally for very early stages, R&D,
Yeah.
product development. We have good incubation programs at universities. Also, the universities and the research institutions have a lot of know-how when it comes to research, when it comes to science, stuff like this. We have angel investors associations. We have VC funds as well in all the different stages. And we have great organizations, networks where you can just meet like-minded people,
Yeah.
whether it's Startup Life or Austrian startups or female networks, for instance, or even networks for international founders as well, specifically for them. Um, and in the end, you can also just come to me.
Well, sounds like a very robust ecosystem that you guys have built there, and definitely we should copy that. Now, we are a new podcast, but still we have formed a tradition now that at the end we have some rapid fire questions for the guests. What is the favorite book that every founder should read?
Every founder. I
Yeah.
mean, you can read my book as well. I also published some books in German and English. No. Um, um, so, I mean, you have these typical standard books, that everyone knows,
Yeah.
every agrees on what they're called and so on. All of them are good. I can tell you one book I read. was by actually Nassim Taleb, a mathematician.
Mhm.
Skin in the Game. I can recommend it. It's very brutal, very honest, and gives you another perspective.
What is the most underrated startup city in Europe?
Oh, very good question. Very good question. I mean, Vienna is can also be so for sure. I have to Vienna as well.
A little
If you
bit
look at
biased
Vienna,
there.
uh, but what I want to mention are two deep tech um, deep tech hubs actually that
Mhm.
have been enormously progressing in the last couple of years. One is Munich and one is Cambridge. Very successful in deep tech, have done a lot of good things apart from Vienna.
uh, who is the founder that you deeply admire?
Um, Also a difficult question. I mean, I can tell you years ago, I would have been Elon Musk. But over time it's changed a bit, you know. For me, it became too political, I can tell you. But still, all these different ventures, you know, and even if he was not the founder of the companies or, the
He's
main
an
initiators,
amazing
still,
founder, but
yeah,
I don't think he's a good role model in terms of
yeah,
the quality of life that he has. I mean, he
yeah, I
has
understand, and
several
yeah,
multi-billion or trillion-dollar
yeah,
companies. He sleeps in the floor in the factories.
yeah,
I
totally,
don't think it's a life
and totally,
many
and
people
and
would want, you know?
and too political as well. But apart from that, not so easy, I can tell you. But so there's one Austrian actually. There are several examples, but one is the founder of Red Bull. Actually, Red Bull is an Austrian
Yeah,
company, and
yeah,
he has really done something extraordinary. A global company out of Austria, in actually in a consumer market. That's not so
yeah.
easy. Huh?
So I'm assuming you're also a Red Bull fan in F1, right?
Yeah, they actually have launched their own venture capital fund.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Just recently. So they're looking for startups.
E-regulation is net positive or net negative for startups?
Um, European Union legislation.
E-regulations in general, yeah.
Um, More positive than negative, but a lot of room for improvement.
Hmm. I tend to agree with you. So, for example, GDPR, I think is one of the good regulations that European Union has, and many other countries should copy it because my data, my rights, and I choose what to do with that. But also from the other end, you have AI Act, for example, and they are trying to regulate an industry where we don't even know what it is yet or where it will go. So my opinion is you should leave it for people to build, and once it grows and it becomes something, then
Totally.
you try to regulate it.
Totally. Actually, it was the same with GDPR. Maybe now it's clear, but when it actually rolled out, it was not so clear.
Yeah.
So don't focus so much always on regulation, and don't always just involve the lawyers and so on. Get people from the practice.
Yeah. If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self starting out in the startup world,
Yeah.
what would that be?
Yeah. So don't think too locally, think globally, and visit different places. Build your
Mhm.
network, and remain patient.
Okay. Well, I also want to give a shout out to Brandon for introducing us and making this great episode and conversation together. For founders listening, whether you're building from Tirana, Vienna, New York, or San Francisco, the fundamentals don't change. So build something that people need, surround yourself with the right people, and don't let the borders define your ambition. Thank you, Kambis, for sharing your insights.